What are we discussing on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast? Let's power rank the NL contenders that we think could give the Dbacks the biggest problems in the postseason.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. On today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, we will be power ranking the NL contenders I think could give the D-backs the biggest problems in the playoffs. And yes, I'm doing this exercise with the intention of the D-backs making it to the postseason because I believe they will be there. As you heard on the podcast earlier this week, biggest second half predictions, D-backs will make it to the postseason. So let's rank the NL contenders I think are the scariest right now in the National League. But before we get into that, thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. Now let's get into the podcast and let's power rank the biggest NL contenders in the National League. These are the teams personally that I think would give the D-backs the biggest problems if we face them in a postseason setting. And also the teams I think are just the best going against the D-backs in the National League. And these are probably the teams that I would rank in order of the wild card race as well, in terms of who I think is the strongest contenders to take those wild card spots. And I'm not putting the D-backs in my power ranking. I'm only ranking the opponents and the foes of the D-backs in the National League. And we're not doing the whole National League. We'll do all the division winners and most of these wild card opponents. The two teams that we're not going to do, actually three teams, the Marlins, the Rockies, and Nationals. The Nationals are still in it, 6 games back, but I'm not going to include them in this exercise. The Rockies and Marlins, they are cooked in the wild card race, so they will not be included. And I'm not going to do a one-by-one breakdown. Well, I actually will do a one-by-one breakdown, but I'm actually going to tell you my entire list first and then go one by one as to my justification for the power ranking. So I'm first going to list out the opponents and then break down each one, why I put them there. So number one in my power ranking for scariest NL contenders is the Philadelphia Phillies. Number 2, the Braves. 3, Dodgers. 4, Padres. 5, New York Mets. 6, Chicago Cubs. 7, Milwaukee Brewers. 8, Cincinnati Reds. 9, San Francisco Giants. 10, Pittsburgh Pirates. And then 11, St. Louis Cardinals. That is how I rank the opponents in terms of the toughest, I think, if the D-backs face them in a postseason setting. And now let me go through one by one as to why I rank them the way they are. And number 11, we're going to start from the bottom, the St. Louis Cardinals. When I look at the Cardinals, I see a retirement community. I see a team over the hill. I believe the Cardinals are just way too old to be a serious contender in the National League. I just don't see any upside on that team. I do think they have a solid depth of talent on that squad. I actually do think they are a pretty talented ball club overall. The issue is, I think that team has virtually no ceiling. And when we look at the performances of some of their best players, like Goldschmidt is tied with Corbin Carroll, I think, for like WRC plus. Like Goldschmidt has been one of the worst players in the National League last year. After a couple years ago winning the MVP, he has just gone in the wrong direction since. And last year wasn't that bad for Goldie, but this year he has fallen off a cliff. And maybe it makes sense. I mean, Goldie is 36 years old. He's not in the prime of his career anymore. Maybe we shouldn't be too surprised with his descent into where he is now. Nolan Arenado has never really been able to refine his groove from Also 2022, where he finished third in MVP voting, just a couple spots behind his teammate Paul Goldschmidt. Last year, he had a down season. This year, he's having an even worse season. And when your two stars in your lineup aren't producing, it's hard to be a good team. And just go up and down their rotation. I mean, their average age in their rotation is like 35, 36 years old. Their best starter is Sonny Gray, who is a very good starter. Was like top 3 in Cy Young voting last year. Very good season this year. And he's probably the only guy in that rotation I do trust. Everyone else is either good or mediocre at best in terms of talent. Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, Miles Mikolas. Like, I just don't trust that team at all. I love their reliever, Ryan Helsley. I think he's one of the best closers in Major League Baseball, but I just think the ceiling is just way too low for the Cardinals. I think they're over the hill as a team. Solid talent, but I just do not trust them. I don't trust them at all in terms of actually doing anything in the postseason. If they make it there, I think they're a pretty easy one and done case study. And so Cardinals, I think, are dead last in terms of the opponents I fear the most in the National League. Number 10, I got the Pittsburgh Pirates. And this could be a spot where maybe it's too low. Maybe in the second half of the season, the Pirates come on even stronger and steal one of these wild card spots. They are right there in the standings. And maybe I should take the standings into account. The Cardinals are a half game up on the third wildcard spot. Like, the Cardinals are 50 and 46. Despite me putting them last in my power ranking, the Cardinals own their second wildcard spot, which might sound crazy, but again, I'm doing this list based off the talent I see on paper and how I view these teams. And also, when you look at run differential, the Cardinals are a minus 38. They were tied for the fourth worst, or excuse me, they were tied for the third worst run differential in the National League. So even though they own the second wild card spot, it's not like they've been that good this MLB season. So I feel no problem putting them dead last in my power rankings. Number 10, I said I have the Pittsburgh Pirates. And again, this could be too low for them because they do have a very strong frontline rotation. The only issue is are they healthy right now? That's the only question. Paul Skeens, we saw him start the All-Star game. He is on cloud nine. He is living every man's dream, right? Paul Skeens is that guy. He might be the best pitcher already. Jared Jones is on the injured list, but if he comes back healthy with Paul Skeens and Mitch Keller, like, the Pittsburgh Pirates have the talent to build a solid playoff rotation. It's just the rest of the team that I don't like that much. I don't think their offense is good enough. Brian Reynolds is a very good baseball player, but outside of him, I don't think there's a ton of bats I trust in that Pirates lineup. That's why they have the third fewest runs in the National League, tied for third fewest runs in the National League. The Pirates, I like their pitching in terms of the playoffs if you're looking at a rotation to build, but outside of that, not strong enough for me. That's why they are at number 10. And then number 9, I got the San Francisco Giants, NL West opponent. And again, the Giants that I have with them is always the same criticism that I've had entering the regular season, criticism that I had last year. I just don't think they have enough top end talent. Now, I do think the Giants are a scrappy team that's able to put together wins. I do think they have a lot of veterans on their roster, a lot of guys who have been there before, right? They're just not exactly having good seasons for the Giants. Like Jorge Soler, he's been in a lot of playoff games and playoff moments, but having a pretty down year. Conforto, same thing. Same with Matt Chapman. Like, they have a lot of proven veterans. There's not a lot of guys having great seasons in terms of their season guys. But just like the Pirates, I think the Giants can build a pretty good postseason rotation. Webb, Hicks, and then if he can turn his season around in the second half, Blake Snell, that's a pretty good top 3. The Giants do have a good bullpen. Their pitching is good enough. I just don't trust their offense at all. And that's been my biggest issue with the Giants probably since I've taken over this podcast in 2020. I've never bought their offense. I've never bought their lineup. I've never thought they had enough talent. They're always a high floor, low ceiling team to me. And that's why they were number 9 in my power rankings of NL contenders. Now we'll go through the rest of my list in segment number 2. But if you're looking to play America's number 1 daily fantasy sports app, then I suggest you hop on Prize Picks because with over 5 million active members, it is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stats projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on prize picks. With as little as 4 correct picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000. Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. This episode of Locked On Diamondbacks is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly want to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city. From hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. I can't lie, I already used one trip on Booking.com when I went to Dbacks versus Padres earlier this year. Check out Petco Park. I love San Diego, and Booking.com made my trip so much easier. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, on the site, or in the Booking.com app. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. If you like the show, please follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for the personal account, Millard.Thomas123 on Instagram for the personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. But now let's get back into the show. And I just went through my power rankings and discussed why I put Cardinals at 11, Pirates at 10, Giants at 9. But now let's talk about my number 8 team, the Cincinnati Reds. And they are just a way more talented team than the Giants, Pirates, or Cardinals. But like a lot of the younger teams in the National League, they just don't have that level of experience that would make me fearful of them in a postseason setting. Like, yes, they're super talented. You go up and down the roster and you see future all-stars all over that team. Even outside the Ella De La Cruzes of the world, you can still see other future all-stars potentially on that roster. A Spencer Steer, a Hunter Green, a Matt McLean potentially, right? They have so many young, talented guys. But I think the issue right now holding me back from putting them higher in my power ranking is their lack of experience and the fact that they've also been kind of injured. But that's why this is another spot on my list, just like the Pittsburgh Pirates, where the Cincinnati Reds could just be too low because of all the injuries that they dealt with the Christian Encarnacion stand, who might be out the rest of the season, potentially back if the Cincinnati Reds make it to the postseason, and the Matt McLeans of the world. Like, they've dealt with a lot of injuries this year. The TJ Friedels, like, there's so many guys up and down their team that have just not been there this season. The Graham Ashcrafts, and if the Cincinnati Reds can get healthy in the second half of the season with the amount of talent that they have, like, yes, they still lack experience, but I could see them jumping a couple teams on this list. The D-backs have handled the Reds for most of this season and last season. That's why I'm not too fearful of them. But if the Reds make it somehow to the postseason this year, get a little taste, get a little experience, I think they're a team to watch out for next season and the year after in the National League race. Number 7 on my power ranking, I got the Milwaukee Brewers, who I just don't think is that scary of a team. They're kind of like the San Francisco Giants to me. The only difference is they have a couple more guys in their lineup that I trust, and they're a team that gets the postseason a lot more than the Giants. The Brewers, you do have to respect them as a playoff veteran team. That's a franchise that goes to the postseason a good amount. They have a lot of guys that have been there and they are experienced. Maybe they're not super talented. That's always my issue with the Brewers, but they made it to the playoffs in 2023, 21, 2020, 2019, and 2018. Like, they make it to the playoffs a lot. That's 5 of the last 6 seasons they made it to the postseason. Now, do they ever advance the wild card round or NLDS? No. In 2018, they did make it to the NLCS and lost in 7. But since then, that was their last great opportunity. And they've kind of just really fallen kind of short of expectations every single season. Since then, there's been a lot of years since 2018 where I've picked the Brewers as potentially the dark horse team in the National League with that really strong frontline rotation going to the postseason. But the Brewers always seem to fall short of expectations. And right now, the Brewers, I think, are playing above expectations, 55 and 42. With the amount of talent that they have, I think is a super impressive record. I thought this might be a season where the Brewers kind of maybe not pack it in, but I don't think they would have been mad if they didn't make it to the playoffs. Instead, they are a bunch of games above 500. They are cruising to the playoffs. They're probably going to win the NL Central. And none of that really matters to me because I just look at that team on talent. The lineup is decent. Christian Yelich having an MVP season. Like I said on a podcast earlier this week, I believe Ketel Marte can finish fifth in MVP voting. But if Christian Yelich takes that spot, I wouldn't be surprised. Having a fantastic season currently, 326 average, 933 OPS. Looks like he's on pace for probably like 20-ish home runs and probably around 40 stolen bases. Or probably like 30 stolen bases. Like he's having himself a fantastic season. You still got Willie Adames, a little Reese Hoskins, Contreras. Like I think their offense is actually solid. I don't think they score they actually do score a good amount of runs, fourth in the National League, but it's their pitching that kind of holds me back a little bit, especially that rotation. I just don't think it would be a strong postseason rotation. Colin Rea, Freddie Peralta, Tobias Myers. Like, I think the Brewers are just another one of those teams, high floor, low ceiling, get to the postseason a lot. But am I actually fearful of them in a postseason setting? No, I wasn't last year. I predicted the D-backs to beat the Brewers last year when they had guys like Corbin Burns and the D-backs did. So would I be scared of the Brewers this year if the D-backs face them in a postseason setting? Probably not. Number 6, I got the Chicago Cubs. And for the Cubs, they're a team where they have good talent in the lineup. They have a solid rotation, like up and down their team. They actually do have quality talent everywhere. They just don't have a lot of superstar talent. And I do think their ceiling is higher than a Brewers because unlike the Brewers, I think Milwaukee's issue was they didn't have like enough talent in their rotation. I actually do think the Cubs have a solid playoff rotation with the Manga, Tyone, Steele, Assad. I actually think they have a decent lineup with Ian Happ, Suzuki, Dansby Swanson, Morel, Michael Bush. Like they have a solid team, but that's kind of like the best adjective that I could use for the Cubs. I think they were solid. I think they were really good, but I don't think they're a great team. I don't see World Series contender with the Cubs. I do think they're a team that could be kind of dangerous in a postseason setting because they are good all over. They have a lot of above average talent at a lot of different spots. I think the biggest issue holding back the Cubs is probably their bullpen. They don't have a ton of high end arms in their bullpen currently. Not a ton of dudes having phenomenal seasons for them. Their rotation is solid. Their lineup is solid. I think their bullpen is holding them back, and that's why I think the Cubs could be a good team, but not really a World Series contending team once you get to the postseason. And then number 5 for me, the New York Mets. I believe the Mets are finally living up to being the most expensive team in Major League Baseball, right? They have the highest payroll and they're finally living up to the billing just a little bit by being 3 games above 500 and owning that third wild card spot. But the Mets, I kind of view like the Chicago Cubs. They're a team with just a lot of above average pieces all over their roster, but I don't think they're really great at any one thing. And maybe it's because guys like Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor are good. They're like borderline all-star level players, but they're not living up to stars. Pete Alonso we've seen be a superstar in the past, and right now he's an all-star level player, but he's not playing like a superstar. Back when he was a rookie, he looked like a superstar with 53 home runs. Even the last couple years, over 40 home runs, right? Over 800 OPS. He's not doing that right now. Francisco Lindor, we've seen him be a superstar in the past. And yes, he's still on pace for a 30-30 season, but I don't get superstar vibes right now from Lindor. He plays elite defense, still on pace for a 30-30 season, but the guy that was in Cleveland, I think it's just way more impactful than the guy that we're seeing right now for the New York Mets. And I look up and down the team, they have a lot of good players. Nimmo, Francisco Alvarez, Lindor, Pete Alonso. Their rotation is full of above average arms as well. No superstars, but Severino, Quintana, Manaya, Peterson. Like it's a lot of solid pieces all over. That's why I compared them to the Chicago Cubs. Both teams are very solid. I think the New York Mets have slightly higher threshold of talent, a slightly higher ceiling. That's why I have the New York Mets number 5 in my power ranking. Now I'll break down my top 4 in my power ranking of NL contenders in segment number 3. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy to use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining supplyhouses.com's free trade master program. Every trade master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free memberships at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. And also, if you want to bet on the D-backs to win their opening series against the Chicago Cubs, then I suggest placing a little wager down on FanDuel Sportsbook because I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to fanduel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right. Let's get back to the podcast and let's break down my top 4 contenders in the National League. At number 4, I got the San Diego Padres, another NL West opponent. And for the Padres, I think they do have a very strong lineup and a very strong rotation. The biggest issue and question mark for the Padres is probably their health overall. How do they look from a health standpoint? Because you got guys like Joe Musgrove currently on the injured list. Fernando Tatis has been hurt this season. Xander Bogaerts just came back. Like, I think their health is probably the biggest question mark. But one of the other reasons you have to take the Padres seriously is because they're not afraid to make moves. With the trade deadline a couple weeks out, July 30th, like the Padres can definitely go out there and acquire more talent, and you wouldn't be surprised at all. I also wouldn't be surprised at all if some of their stars start to pick it up in the second half. Could we see a renaissance in the second half from Manny Machado? Could we see Fernando Tatis go to another level? Potentially, I think Dylan Cease could be better as well. Like, I think the talent level on the San Diego Padres is super high. Maybe they're not always living up to the talent that they have, but I still think their ceiling is very high. I think they could get better in the second half. They're not afraid to go out there and make moves to improve their team as well. And then just personally, if the D-backs face the Padres in a postseason setting, like I would be scared, and it wouldn't just be because of the Machados and the Tatises, but the Haas and Kims of the world always destroy the D-backs in the biggest moments. I would be scared of the dudes on the margins, the Draxon Profars of the world, right? You also got Luis Ariz, once again, just being the batting average king for the National League. Like, they just have a lot of professionals mixed in with some star talent on that Padres team. And that's why they are number 4 in my power ranking. And then the top 3 in the National League, I think, are on a tier of their own. I think I would put Phillies, Braves, Dodgers in tier 1. I think I would put Padres, and I kind of feel like the Padres should be on their own tier in tier 2. Then I would put Mets, Cubs, Reds, tier 3, and then Giants, Padres, tier 4, and then kind of the Cardinals on their own tier in tier number 5. That's kind of how I would do it. If I had to tier all these teams up, because I think the top three power ranking guys on my list are just in a tier of their own in terms of being a World Series contender. These are the three strongest teams and the three scariest teams if the D-backs face off against them in the postseason. Number three, the LA Dodgers. Great lineup, great rotation. And just like the Padres, I have the same question mark with the Dodgers. How healthy are you going to be in the second half once we get to the postseason? Because their injured list could be an all-star team amongst itself. Mookie Betts, Max Muncy, Yamamoto, Glasnow, Bueller, like the injured list for the Dodgers is pretty insane. But if you guys can get healthy, if those guys can get healthy for the Dodgers, like we know their lineup is super talented. They still scored the second most runs in the National League right behind the D-backs. They still have one of the most talented, if not the most talented rotation in baseball with Yamamoto, Glasnow, Walker Bueller, and whoever else you want to throw out there for the Dodgers. If you can get them healthy and going, their bullpen is still nasty. Like there's still so much talent oozing from this Dodgers roster that I'm not very concerned with them. And also the D-backs faced the Dodgers last year in the postseason. They beat the Dodgers in the postseason. So hard for me to put the Dodgers in the top two. And I've seen the D-backs already take them out. We know what Christian Walker can do in LA. That's why we have the Dodgers number 3 on our list. Number 2, we have the Atlanta Braves, who, when you actually look at the stats, scoring, the Braves are 10th in the National League. They have not been that good from a scoring perspective this season because their lineup, for the most part, has been pretty disappointing. Outside Marcell Ozuna, everyone is having a down year in that Braves lineup. You go up and down. Ozuna is the only guy in that lineup with over an 800 OPS, which is crazy to think about when you have Matt Olson, Ozzy Albies, Austin Riley, Michael Harris. Like all those guys put up all-star video game numbers last year, and this season they have not been able to do that. But I still think in a postseason setting, if I see Olson or Riley stroll up to the plate, that I'm still going to be very fearful of them if it's a late and close game situation. Those are still some super smashers to have in the middle of your lineup. Then the rotation is still nasty. Chris Sale, Fried, Ronaldo Lopez is having a great season. Charlie Morin is an ageless wonder. They got a great bullpen. Like the Braves are a super talented team. I don't care that they're 10th in runs in the National League. They have so much talent. They're a proven postseason team as well, I believe. They won the World Series not that long ago. That's why I have them at number 2 in my power ranking. And then number 1, by far to me, the scariest team in the National League is the Philadelphia Phillies, because I think they just have the most dynamic team overall. They have a healthy team, first of all, going right now. And you look up and down their roster. I mean, their lineup is stacked. Bryce Harper having an MVP season. Trey Turner, he's been healthy, has maybe been the MVP this year. Alec Baum was in the home run derby. Schwarber still a superstar player, hitting bombs every single day. They have a strong playoff rotation. Nola, Wheeler, all of a sudden Ranger Suarez is looking like a Cy Young candidate. Christopher Sanchez was an all-star. They got a decent bullpen as well. And of course, they have the best home field in Major League Baseball as well. No one wants to go into Citizens Bank Park in a postseason setting. They are super scary in that ballpark. That's why they are number 1 in my power ranking for National League opponents. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back next week for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.